we're not just a team, we're a family. It's like, shut up. No, like if I don't do my job, you're gonna fire me. You can't fire your brother. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Mitchell Myles is the founder of KneeWell,
a business consulting and services company that helps executive teams strengthen sales leadership and build predictable, scalable revenue operations.
You were CEO or president of this company doing $50 million a year. What made you decide then that you wanted to walk away from that after all that growth you'd had there?
Yeah. So I think if a manager leaves, there's usually going to be like collateral turnover. I've actually dealt with this. I would try to mitigate the turnover as much as possible. So I would say, hey, like if I just fired you for no reason without any warning, you'd be pretty pissed, right? They'd be like, yeah. I'd be like, okay. So like, I would never blindside you like that. I want you to do that to me.
From window cleaner to president of a $50 million company before he was 26.
Mitchell coached the executive teams behind some of the biggest names in the industry: Tony Robbins, Grant Cardone, and Agora.
If you can do this for me, ultimately you're doing it for you, and it's going to put you in a position to where you're the obvious choice, and I'll want to promote you. And then that's like to their benefit. 80 to 90% of the success of these companies, like in the high tech, it's just marketing. They're like, these people don't really know, like they get to a certain level of success. Maybe they hit 3 million, 5 million, maybe even 10. And then there's like this plateau.
How would you define a good leader, and how would you build a good leader as well?
Yeah, a good leader, I think it comes down to number one.
So Mitch, thanks for being here, man. I'm looking forward to this. So yeah, we'll kick it off. Like, how did you get into this space? A bit about your journey to where you are now, what you've achieved, and we'll go from there.
It was kind of an interesting introduction to the space. So I dropped out of school in like the 8th grade. So I didn't even go to high school. I didn't go to college. I was just
8th grade. How old is 8th grade?
So I was 13.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And it was like for a lot of reasons. There was kind of like family stuff. And so I was actually just in construction, working for my dad up until I was like 17, 18, give or take. And around that time, I met this girl. And I was like, I think I'm going to marry this girl, And I'm like, I'm a window cleaner.
Yeah.
What do I do? So I'm like, I also was painting, like commercial painting and window cleaning. So it was a lot of like physical labor. I remember thinking, I got to figure out a way to make money with my brain. Like there's got to be an answer here. So I started looking, just Googling, YouTubing, how do I make money online? Is that even a thing? So this is back in like 2015, I think, 2014, 15. And I remember I got hit with this ad. It was like this guy in glasses. He's like, here in my garage behind me. It was Ty Lopez. You remember those ads? Yeah. So I got into his funnel, and it was actually the first course, anything that I ever spent $2,000 on. I mean, I was just so terrified. I thought this might be a scam, but it was Sam Ovens and his consulting accelerator.
And so how old were you at this point?
So I was 19 at this point. Yeah. So I remember I'm on the webinar. I just applied for a credit card, maxed it out, and got on that course. And then I started an agency. That was like the gateway drug to all like online entrepreneurship. Yeah. So yeah. And then eventually I started getting clients. It was going well. I replaced my income and I could do that full time. And then I got on a sales call for a company called Traffic and Funnels. Back there, they're out of business now, but I was on a sales call there. They ended up offering me a job. And I was like, at the time I'm just doing marketing, but I ended up joining the sales team as like a sales coordinator, which is like a sales admin. That's actually where I met Cole. So I started setting appointments, and Cole and I were put into a pod, and we just crushed it. We really bonded at the time and just, learned from each other. And eventually, I joined Closers.io. So
nice. And then you went on, I don't know how long later, you went on to be CRO President of Cole, which is like a $50 million company or something like this.
Yeah.
How did you go from, that guy who like just started your agency, getting in online to like, at that level?
Yeah. I mean, dude, it was a lot of hard work. I remember, again, I was learning marketing when I was doing my agency stuff. So I started kind of learning the fundamentals of like copy and communication. And everybody during that time, it was just like all of the gurus at the time, it was a lot of like motivation and like mindset work. And I think that actually was a good thing. Eventually, I think that became almost like, it was like the equivalent of AI slop today. It's like people wanted like actual business advice, but a lot of at the time. So eventually I got pretty good at sales. So I was setting appointments and I was on all the sales meetings when I was at Traffic and Funnel. So when I left that company and I started another consulting offer helping other companies create like these appointment setting teams. And it forced me to start closing deals because I'm like building these setting teams, and most of these companies I was working with, their sales teams just sucked. They were just really bad. So I started doing this kind of thing where I would train these setters by being like, hey, set for me. And I got really good at sales. Cole knew that, so we were still friends. And so he ended up bringing me on and was like, as like a partner. And he's like, hey, take over sales and fulfillment. So because due to the nature of what Closers.io was doing at the time was like building sales teams, like that's what I was kind of already doing. So I could take these sales calls, I knew how to sell it, and I also knew how to fulfill. So I'd start building these sales teams. And so I was kind of already this GM, but eventually we started scaling. I started building leaders under me. At that time, I was just obsessed with like leadership, finding executives, developing leaders, like operations, culture, learning all those things. So then Cole promoted me to president and CEO. I took over our B2C and our B2B company. And yeah, so that was just over the course of like 3 years, you know?
Well, which is obviously very fast. And like you would have been there in the days where you went from like, I think 0 to like 8 figures or multiple 8 figures in a very, very short time frame. So like, why do you think that was?
Like why we grew so fast?
Yeah. Why do you think you're able to grow so fast? And like, how did you develop yourself so fast as well? From, you know, from someone who's like doing sales to then someone who's being CEO of a company of that size?
I got some advice, you know, earlier on the way here, you had mentioned Jim Quick, you know? So that was actually a program that I bought, and I read his book, and he said something in that book about like the fastest way to learn something is to either teach it or to learn it, and you kind of have to trick yourself into thinking I'm going to teach this, right? And I knew that. So back before Closers, when I first started selling, I reached out to other companies in the space, including like Tanner Chittister. There's another company with like Ryan Steenberg's company. And I was like, hey, you know, I'll come in and coach your clients. Like most of these agency things, right? Most of them, they need to learn sales. So while I was learning sales, I was teaching it. And I think it's helped me learn really quickly. And then by the time I ended up at Closers, I was doing a lot of coaching. So I think like the combination of like, while I'm reading books, going through these programs, I was also teaching it. And I think that helped me like learn very, very quickly. Plus there's just a level of obsession that you have to have. It's all I thought about.
Yeah. Okay. Good. And it's like, and then you walked away from that, which, you know, so at the time you were doing obviously very, very well. You were CEO or president of this like company doing $50 million a year. What made you decide then that you wanted to walk away from that after all that growth you'd had there?
Yeah. So I think the honest answer is a few things. I think I felt like I had sort of peaked at that company at the time. I wanted new challenges. I wanted to get into B2B. And then the other reason was, it was really just like, you know, like God, if you will. Like it was like an inner voice that was like, there's other things that you should go do. And so I'd kind of been thinking about it, and I'd voiced it to Cole. I was like, hey, I want to either find a way to grow even more here, or maybe I want to go do my own thing. And so it was a series of conversations with him, and I felt this green light, like literally like just in my gut. Like it was like God, it was like, maybe it's time. And then the official like confirmation was like, Cole was like, bro, like he's like sometimes I get this feeling like in my bones, like I just know something's right. And he's like, I think you need to go do this. So he was like super supportive, and we still talk all the time. So
awesome. And then, so what did you step into after that?
Yeah. So I started this nonprofit it's like a Christian nonprofit. I wrote a book, and I hosted this event in Arizona centered on community and mental health and things like that, things that like are just really fulfilling for me. And it wasn't obviously it's a nonprofit. It wasn't for the money or anything. It's just very fulfilling. But I also got, on the business side, I got into like B2B tech. So I was helping B2B tech companies with their growth. So it's a very different challenge. It was like learning how to work with these B2B tech companies selling software, or like there's a company called Newton X. They sell like AI market research to companies like JP Morgan, like very high sophisticated sales. Learning when there's multiple decision makers, multiple stakeholders. So I kind of started learning MEDIC, which is like a sales methodology. So it was like a new challenge, and that was exciting.
Yeah, awesome. And after that, you stepped into, because you were doing consulting for quite a while, right? Leadership, executive coaching. So tell me a little bit about that. Yeah,
like the executive side.
Yeah.
So obviously my one of the strengths that I had at Closers, it was sort of evolved. So it started as, you know, I was working, it was very sales focused. I'm training salespeople, recruiting salespeople, writing pitches, reviewing calls. But eventually the bottleneck became like me, right? And even Cole to a degree. It's like you hit a certain point where the constraint is no longer like sales. It's actually building great leaders that can problem solve. You can delegate not only tasks, but decisions. Like that's very difficult to achieve. I think that's why a lot of companies stall. But that's one of the things we did really early on was we had this, you know, conversation. And it was like, we can only grow at the speed that we can attract and ramp and manage leaders. So that's one of the things we focused on. So I think my strength became recruiting these top level, like these managers, these leaders, and managing them, empowering them, things like that. So when I left, that was actually a strength that I had, because that was the last 2 years that I was at Closers. I was just obsessed with creating great leaders, creating great teams, culture, operations. So I just went on to go and teach other people. Once I left, a lot of people reached out, was like, hey, can you help me? Like, I can't seem to find a great sales manager, or I can't seem to get off calls, or I can't seem to find a CMO, or like whatever it may be. So they started asking me questions like that. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I remember that's how I first came across you. It was in that mastermind, and you were giving a group call on leadership or something like this. It was just before you left, I think.
Yeah.
So it would have been around about that time. Yeah. So because you've obviously worked with a lot of people in that space, like what's a common thing that people are struggling with, like with leadership, and like why do you think you became so passionate around that topic?
Yeah, I think I became passionate because, well, number one, because it was my role. Like my role at the company, again, not at first, but eventually it became like, okay, it was first we had to define that. So it was like, what's Cole's role? What's my role? And Cole was like, we all agreed that if Cole can just focus on marketing, like the more he can focus on that, the more we win. Right. So then I just got obsessed. It wasn't like a natural inclination to do it, but it was like just very logical. Like, okay, if I need to be able to run the day-to-day and build the machine, right? The actual day-to-day ops of the company. And so that I just like started consuming so many great books on this, like Jim Collins, like Built to Last and Great by Choice, Patrick Lencioni, like The Advantage, 4 Obsessions of an Extraordinary Executive, like just consuming as much around this topic. And it became very apparent that that's very needed. And that's not really talked about in the high ticket space. I think the reason why a lot of companies struggle with that, to answer your question, is because like 80 to 90% of the success of these companies, like in the high ticket space, it's just marketing, right? Marketing and sales. So like these people don't really know, like they get to a certain level of success. Maybe they hit 3 million, 5 million, maybe even 10. And then there's like this plateau. And I think they struggle because then they start what like Hormozi talks about, the red dress, right? The lady in the red dress, where they start thinking, maybe we've hit our TAM, maybe we need to try this other offer, maybe. And they stay in that innovator. Like, have you ever read the book by Lex Sisney called Organizational Physics?
No.
So he's like, he's an engineer, but he takes this like very scientific approach, like a physicist, to like the science of scaling a company, right? And he talks about there's these 4 underlying forces to any business. And he says it's innovation, so innovator. What is the other one? It's producer, and then stabiliser and unifier, right? And so it's not like a personality test. It's just understanding what is needed at certain stages. And so in the beginning, it's all innovator, right? You're just trying to find that product market fit. You're trying to, validate your OSS, your optimal selling system. So it's a lot of innovator. And eventually you hit this point where like you need to stop innovating and you just got to produce. And then stabiliser is like the product, and then unifier is like stabilizing and unifying is like management and like bringing the team together and getting the right people on the bus, right? So what I realized was like most of the people in this space, due to the nature, it attracts a lot of marketers, it's a lot of marketing. And so I think a lot of people they don't know how to get out of that innovator mode, and then there's just a lot of ignorance around stabilizer, unifier type of force. So I got really obsessed with that. Like my goal was like, if Cole ever sells this or he wants to go start any other company, I want him to feel like I need Mitchell as my operator. Like I need to have him. Like I wanted to make myself like so necessary. So yeah.
And do you feel like that's a bit of a cycle? Because you mentioned there about like you're an innovator, then a producer, then a manager. Like for me, like, you get to a certain point and like once you've executed, you get to maybe 500K, $1 million a month. You've now got a team in place. You've learned how to lead. You've got good systems in place and all of this. You kind of have to go back to being an innovator, right? To get to that next level. So like, how do you think about like switching between the 3?
Well, I mean, I think more often than not, when people think they need to go back into innovator, they just don't. However, that does happen. Like eventually you hit a point where like you have to start reintroducing products, right? So for example, like, you have high ticket, low ticket, right?
Yeah.
So like, but did you start with high ticket?
We started with high ticket.
Yeah.
So for us, like we got to maybe 200-300K a month with high ticket only. built a good team, had good systems and everything. Like it was running pretty systematically, like to a point where I'm like, what do I even do with my time anymore? Right.
Yeah.
This is kind of why I was asking, like, cause I kind of went back into innovator mode. That's when we introduced the low ticket, and like that 10x the business in like the next 7 months.
Yeah.
But if I was like in execution mode and producing mode, like I never would have done that. I made that move. I would have just been trying to get like 2% better, 1% better on the things that we're already doing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's like, for me, like, I feel like my issue is like, I'm in innovator mode too much. Like I'm throwing too many ideas on the team.
100%. That in my experience, that is the common problem. But I think, so, Hormozy has that good framework. It's called like more, better, new.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like you start off, if you have a problem, it's like, what if I just do more? And then it's like, okay, well, maybe you need to do it better. And then maybe you need something new. I think it's a good framework. It's fundamental. It's very like elementary, but I think it's really good. And so I think if you're finding yourself like hitting a cap, I mean, I think it really just comes down to your ability to like analyze the problem, identify the problem, and like be able to solve it. And I think if you can identify what the problem is, so for, like in your case, it might have been, maybe it was like profitability or something like that, where
it was that, but it was also just that like really strong instinct that you were talking about earlier. Like I really just felt like it wasn't the direction like I needed to. And also when I looked like 9-figure companies and like my niche, they were all doing that kind of like low ticket to high ticket.
Yeah.
So like, someone, like many people gave me the advice at that time, like, no, you don't do it. It's a distraction. You should just keep doing this.
Yeah.
But like, I just felt it inside, like, no, like we need to pivot to this.
Yeah. Well, I think again, if someone, I think in that case, I think you knew, and part of this, it comes down to like, I think the idea is like weight of believability. Like Bezos talks a lot about like decision making. Like if you're going to approach a problem, you should have a system for that. And I think it's really hard when you're taking in outside advice. A lot of people are just going to tell you what worked for them, but they don't have all the context that you have. But I think you were in the business, you knew what you've tried in the past, what's worked, what hasn't. And so I think you probably just had that like gut feeling, like, I know I need to do this. But if somebody doesn't have that, I think a good framework is try to just maximize and do more, see how you can improve. And then sometimes like you do need to start something new. Like, okay, we really should introduce a low ticket product, and that's going to help us liquidate as much of the acquisition costs and generate more leads, so on and so forth. So, and that's what helped you kind of scale, right?
Yeah.
But I think the idea was that like, there's an important lesson is that you waited until you really capped, right? Like you waited till that point. I think a lot of people just do it because it's fun. Because they just, I think entrepreneurs typically enjoy starting new things. It's fun and it's exciting, but a lot of times it can be a distraction. So
yeah, 100%. Like you end up being busy, not productive a lot of the time. Yeah, and it's a habit I had to get used to. It's like, what problem am I actually trying to solve by working on this current task?
Yeah.
And like oftentimes like you won't even have a good answer for it. Yeah. And like it's just a fun thing to be working on. And it's distracting you from like what deep down you should be working on,
right? Which
is the boring thing.
100%. That's why I did like Cole, and used to say this all the time. He's just like 9 times out of 10, the problem isn't that people don't know how to solve the problem per se. It's that they don't even really know what the problem is.
Yeah.
Like if you can clearly identify the problem, a lot of times the solution becomes kind of obvious.
Yeah.
Or hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. And so going back to the leadership and executive coaching, so you've done that for some pretty big brands, is that right? Or big names in the space, like 8-9-figure brands. And so when you walk into a new team, like what's the first thing you're looking at? What's the first thing you're doing? How are you auditing the team? And like, what's your process?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just have a very intense process for doing that. And it really started when I was back at Closers. Like it was sort of my routine. We would have these executive offsites where like Cole and, all the leaders, we'd, go somewhere, or we stay in whatever. We called them offsites. Sometimes they were on sites, but it's like, what is an offsite when you're in a remote company? But either way, we're going to clearly review the last 90 days and then set goals and projections and identify like what problems are we solving for the next 90 days. And that process, we would do that regularly. And I sort of started doing that even on like a monthly basis, a weekly basis, on like a smaller scale. So I got really in the habit of identifying problems and constraints. Like that's how we scaled the business. It was our whole ethos around the business was identifying and solving constraints. So what that process looks like is usually I start off like qualitative, and not like, honestly, if I go into a company and I'm going to do I think I said qualitative, I meant quantitative. So if I'm going to do a quantitative analysis of a business, which what I mean by that is the numbers and the data. A lot of times like the problem manifests just from that. Like if I'm like, hey, I need all your data on all things like lead generation, lead nurture, conversions, back-end revenue, like profit. I need to know everything. Most of the time, like the departments can't even agree on like what the actual number is. So like data hygiene is a big problem, especially when you're hitting like, you're at like 10 mil, to 20 mil, even at closers. Like sometimes, I mean, I think most of our data was good, but even before I left, like there were certain numbers like nobody could agree on, but it starts with that. If I can get all the numbers, that's a good thing. And then I'm just going to rigorously like analyze all of that. And then I identify like where the constraints are quantitatively, right? But here's the important piece is that a lot of people stop there. So like that tells you like where to look. It doesn't really tell you what the problem is, right? So I know for a fact, like maybe it's lead nurture, maybe it's back end revenue or retention or whatever, right? So then I know where to look. And so then I do a qualitative analysis. And that's where I literally, for example, if it's like sales calls, like the team's just not converting and they're blaming, marketing, which is quite common, then I'm going to just listen to calls. And that's a qualitative analysis, which is really boring work, but it's I would just pull a batch, randomly select the calls. I review a ton of them. AI can kind of start to help with that these days. And then, maybe if the quality of the leads are really pretty bad, then I'm going to go through the whole funnel or something. But so it's quantitative, then qualitative. And then I do a personnel review with the leaders. So I have them list, everyone who's churned in the last 90 days, who's on the team now, who's their top performer, bottom performer. So I start to get a pretty good feeling. Like a lot of times those things are connected. So like if the sales team's drastically underperforming and then I do a personnel review, then now a lot of times it's like, okay, it's the sales leaders that they're having trouble with. Someone churned last month, they just hired a new guy. So then I'll pull sales meetings and listen to those. So it's really just finding out where to look and then looking is kind of the philosophy there.
Yeah. And so how would you define like a good leader? And like, what would you look for in a good leader? Because like, I remember when I first got into it, like you read like a bunch of leadership books and a lot of it's very like vague. It's like, because there's an art and a science to leadership. And a lot of it teaches kind of like the art, which takes time. I'm someone who learns best just from like the science. Yeah. Like what you referred to earlier. And so like, how would you define a good leader? And like, how would you build a good leader as well?
Yeah. Yeah, dude, loaded topic. A good leader, I think it comes down to, number one, like, do they have the capacity to solve complex problems is really important. So this is kind of like not as PC as like some people may want, but like, cause in the whole entrepreneurial world, I think we tend to hear a lot of motivational speeches around like, it's not about talent, it's about hard work. And that is true. Don't get me wrong. That is true. However, you can look at so many of these studies and they talk about IQ and how like IQ is the greatest determining factor of success in the workplace, right? And some people just have a hard time accepting that. I think a lot of it's just because there's negative connotations around IQ. It's not necessarily that someone's like educated as much as it's like processing power as like is like what Cole used to say. So can they actually like solve complex problems? So IQ is a big one. And you can test that. I think during the recruiting process, like I just want to see them work. Like I don't rely on an interview too much. I'm just going to get them as close to doing the job as I can because that's like the objective truth. Like, can you do the job? So I'll do like a work sample or something. But so it's like, can they solve complex problems? And then the next one is conscientiousness. So they can actually take like, personality tests and test their conscientiousness, but that's their willingness to work. So again, those two things are really important. It's not one or the other. If you ideally you find both. So a great leader needs to have, again, like the capacity to solve complex problems. And you can test that through an IQ test, or you teach them something and then have them teach it back to you. So can you teach them something new? And then can they teach it back? That's called like verbal fluency. Like, if I tell them something, how quick can they get it? Right. So that's really key. And another good way to do this is like written thought. Like I want to understand how they think. And when someone writes, that's a pretty good indicator of how they think. So I'm going to make them write out like a report or something. So again, a capacity to solve complex problems. The next one is like willingness to work, which is conscientiousness. That's kind of like the work ethic side. And then the last one is kind of underrated, but it's true, is like, are they stable? Right? Yeah, emotionally stable. Because you can have someone with a lot of raw talent and a lot of skill, but like, for example, like let's say you get someone who is like this young, hungry sales manager, but like you get off a meeting and he's super pissed and he just goes and gossips to the sales team. It's like, that's very risky, right? So, and then, I've seen this happen where like very talented people and they'll like form a freaking mutiny. It's like ridiculous, right? So again, that's so it's like maturity and emotional stability is really key. So that's, I think like, That's what I'm looking for. I think that, and then the last bit would just be like culture fit. Like, are they really bought into the mission and vision of the company? Yeah.
Interestingly, and I was saying this the other day to someone, we ran like a personality test amongst like all our top performers and all the bottom performers. And one thing that all the top performers had in common was emotional stability.
Really?
Yeah. And that was like very common in salespeople. Yeah. Which is so true, right? So if you have a salesperson emotionally unstable, like they have one bad call and they think like the business is tanking and like all the leads are bad.
Yeah. Like, I forgot to sell, Yeah.
And then how are you looking to develop leaders under you? Do they have to have those 3 baseline things in order for you to like work on them, or like what's that process like for you? Yeah,
so I mean, those things are connected, like acquiring talent and then developing talent. I don't want to over compartmentalize, because if my job is to develop talent, the goal here is to find the best talent. So I'm not taking them from 0 to 1, right? So like, you have to really spend time on developing a great recruiting mechanism, like a great talent acquisition system, right? And so ideally, you acquire the talent that you need, so that it doesn't require a lot of developing. But if you're still going to need to develop, so the way that I do that is, honestly, man, like, I heard Mr. Beast one time talk about how he called it clone himself, and he hired like a CEO, but he just had him shadow him for like a year, right? Like, literally follow him around, do everything. So I kind of think about it that way. It's a little bit more difficult if you're not in an office and you have like a remote team, but I want to get them around me. I want them to understand how I think. And it really comes to, I mean, again, ideally you're finding someone that has the skill sets. What you're trying to transfer is how to think, right? Not just like what to do, but like how to think. And I think that way you can, like, for example, if I hire somebody and I teach them the skill, I can delegate tasks, but that's not as leveraged as being able to delegate decisions. And so the goal here is I can actually delegate a decision to them, right? That's leadership. Like, I want to be able to not have to think about it. I want to know that you can do this without me. And in order to do that, they need to understand how to think. And so that's really what I'm trying to transfer. And the way that I do that is just getting them to like, one of the things I would do is I would sort of like, I don't want to say quiz, but in a way, like if I went through, for example, like I was promoting like a client success director one time. And what I did is I went through our entire playbook for account management and fulfillment. And I spotted things I was like, okay, that could be better, or this is out of date, or we don't really do that anymore, or that's not really accurate anymore, or whatever. So I sort of spotted these and I just took notes, but like I wanted to see what the team was made of. So there was like 2 people on the account management team that I was thinking, I think I'd promote one of them. Like, I would for sure, it would be one of these 2. And I sent it to both of them and I said, hey, can you do me a favor? And they didn't know that I was thinking about promoting anybody, but I was like, could you just go through this playbook and just send me notes on things that could be better, things that are out of date, whatever. And one guy just never did. And the other guy did, and it was like very good. And it was pretty close to what I did. And I was like, okay, that's a great example. So I just get him on a Zoom and I was like trying to dig, like, I want to understand how he's thinking. What made you think that? What made you think that? Then I showed him my notes and then he kind of agreed and all these things. And so the next thing is just getting them to shadow, like if we're going to have an offsite, like I have them come to a portion of it, like have them get involved. I just think getting them around you, having those problem solving conversations and trying to teach them how to think, I know it's like a little bit vague, but hopefully I give you some practical examples too.
Yeah. And also I heard some really good advice from Ladle Hormozy once, like whenever you have someone in your team, like you should always be developing your team to think more like leaders, even if they're not a leader, right?
100%.
And so like whenever someone in your team comes to you and says like, hey Mitch, should I do this or should I do this? It's like, you're not going to respond and answer. You're going to respond and be like, what would you do? And tell me why and why would you do that?
Yeah.
And you're constantly just developing people to a point where like they won't even ask you anymore. They'll be like, hey, like I think I should do this. Like, what's your feedback?
Yeah.
And then from there, like, the next level up from there is like, you have full autonomy over the decision. Just let me know what you did and we'll
100%. We stole this from Jeff Bezos, but like his whole system at Amazon was like this memo strategy. Like if you have a problem that you want to bring up, like write a memo. And then anytime the leadership team got together for a meeting, everyone had to write a memo and then they all had to read it first before the meeting started so that you could just get right into the important stuff. And I think it's like the magic is in the memo itself, but it's getting people to think through something and writing it out. Because 9 times out of 10, let's say you go to write it out and it's just incoherent. It's like, okay, well, like this probably wasn't that important. Or if you require it too, if somebody's like, if somebody starts to write it out and then they're kind of thinking, oh wait, maybe this isn't important. So it's like, if it's not important, usually the memo doesn't even happen, right? Which is good. And then the next thing is, again, as they're writing it out, a lot of times the solution starts to come to them. And so they don't have to go to you. They're just like, oh, I know what to do now. So getting people to write out their ideas and their observations, I think, is really important to getting them to like learn how to think. Yeah. And I think a good way to do that is to give them a structure. So it's like, if you think about it, again, like written thought is the clearest form of thought. And if you can give them a structure on how to write that memo, you're literally teaching them how to think through problems. Yeah. And I think that goes a long way.
I think one of the biggest issues is like so many people, like, and even the founders or the leader themselves, they lack clarity on what progress even looks like and what that development even looks like. And so one of the best things we did, we developed like a skill matrix for like every single role in the business. It basically looks like there's like 4 or 5 skill sets required to do the job well. And there's like level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. And like each level for each component says like, here's exactly what you should, like, here's how you would act or behave at this level for this skill. And here's exactly what you need to do to get to that next level. And then like progress into leadership becomes very black and white. Because this is like, you're operating at level 2 here, 3 here, 4 here, 5 here, right? This is the bottleneck. You need to fix this. Like, let's get you from 2 to 3 here.
That's good.
And that's really helped like a lot, like, cause we had like 4 or 5 managers, like just in the sales team at one point, and it was massive and just like helping them get way more out of their team. So yeah, you talk a little bit about identity architecture for leaders. Your framework for a CEO is like clarity, physiology, and decision-making power. Talk to me a little bit about that.
What were the 3 you said?
Physiology, clarity, and decision-making.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this I got like early on in my career through an old boss that I had. He just had such high standards. And this is actually the boss that Cole and I had together. And he was very hard to work for. Yeah. Very intense. And he broke it down into, it was like identity, vision, and regulation. And over time, I felt like that wasn't quite enough. So I broke it into actually 4. So it was like identity, vision, physiology, and inspiration. And so those are the 4 things I think that are really important. Like, and it comes from, I don't know who spoke about this first, but just through like, there's a good book called like Psycho-Cybernetics. There's a good book by Todd Herman called The Alter Ego Effect. Now, what's the one from James Clear? Atomic Habits. Yeah, Atomic Habits kind of talks about this. So I don't know who said it first, but there's this core idea that people tend to believe that behavior dictates our identity, right? But it's really, that's the other way around, right? Like who we believe we are, actually, we tend to always behave in alignment with who we think we are. So I think like getting really clear on your identity and keeping that at the forefront all the time is important for like behavior and all of those things. So that was something that like our old boss and even like coaches that I had along the way really pushed into me, because at the time I had this really poor self-image of myself because I didn't go to high school. Like I inherently thought that I was just at a disadvantage, I just grew up really poor, didn't go to high school, didn't have a college education, like, and I'm trying to get into business. Like, what am I, in my mind, I was like, I'm gonna have to work 20 times harder, which I think actually helped me in a way. Yeah. But over time, I had to get out of this like self-deprecating identity and beliefs about myself. So just getting really clear on who you are, I think the best way to do that is to write it down, like that's what I did. And then just go and remind yourself like who you are. I just think that's important. And that sort of is like the foundation, and it sort of forms like your physiological habits, like, which I'm sure, I'm preaching to the choir here. You know how physiology is important. Like one of my old coaches used to say, like, if biology and mindset got into a fight, that biology would win. I think it's like pretty good way to think about it. There's certain exceptions to the rule, like David Goggins tends to break that rule, if you read his book. But yeah, having like really good habits, that I just think it's working smarter, not harder. So physiology. So anytime, for example, like I had a leader who would fall into a rut, or like a sales rep that would fall into a rut. That was sort of like my checklist. Like I would check I would go to like their vision as a good place to start. So like I can't tell you how many times this happened. Like some sales rep falls into a rut and he's like, I don't know what's going on. And I'm like, well, okay, well, let's go through your vision for your life. Like what are your goals? And they'd be like, oh, my goal was to make $15K a month as a sales rep. And I'd be like, okay, well, last month you made like 22. And they're like, oh yeah. I'm like, yeah, like you have no aim now. And I think for high performance, aim isn't a necessity, right? You have to know what you're working towards. So we would like adjust that, right? And then but like, let's say that was fine, I'd go down to like physiology. Okay, like walk me through like your habits lately. And a lot of times they'd like used to go to the gym and now they don't. They're just like working around the clock. Like they freaking drinking on the weekends on Sunday night. And so they're like hungover on Monday. I'm like, okay, like that's just plain dumb, you know? Yeah. And so, yeah, just vision, physiology. I think inspiration is underrated. So inspiration meaning, what do I mean by that? So for me, when I was in sales and I was like at my peak, you know, I was clearing like 40 to 50K a month in commission. And I remember I did hit a rut at that time. And I sort of went through this list. I was like, okay, identity, no, I'm clear on who I am. Vision, no, I still have a vision. Physiology was like 10 out of 10. I'm like going to the gym, I'm eating well, like I go on walks, like all the basics, you know, my sleep is 10 out of 10. I used to wear like an Oura ring all the time. And I'm like, what is going on? And so I just went back to like my journal entries because I would like write a lot. And I found that when I was at my peak, I was reading every day, like new concepts, new ideas. And I kind of stopped and I just felt uninspired.
Yeah.
So maybe this isn't important for everyone, but I think for me, I found that it was really important. I needed to feel inspired. And to feel inspired, I needed like an appetite of new concepts, ideas, inspiration. So reading about history, I got really into history, things like that. So I think inspiration, you know, is important too.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Like whenever my performance like dips, like you just notice like you're uninspired, like you say, like the first thing I do is audit those things. It's like, how's my training been recently? Like, how's my sleep been? Like, what have I been eating? Have I been in processed foods?
Yeah.
Am I clear on like what we're even working on right now? And like, it's always one of those things that's off. And like when you audit those things, like, you know, you normally realize like it's just being aware of it, right?
Yeah.
So on the leadership side, to wrap up that topic, I'll give you some situations and I want you to tell me how you would deal with them.
Okay.
Your top closer is outperforming everyone, but has a terrible attitude, and the rest of the team like is obviously observing that. How do you deal with this situation?
So a really great place to start is to identify like is the attitude out of alignment with the core values of the company? Like, can you articulate that? It's like, what are your core values for the company?
Like for us?
Yeah.
So for us, like speed to learn and implement is like super important. Integrity, and then accountability and competitive edge.
Okay. So like, how would you define integrity?
Well, so integrity for us would be like, you're not like just, so in a sales example, like you're not just saying whatever you can to get the sale over the line. Like you're not just saying like, hey, yeah, we'll give you this, and this, like when we don't do that. And so, yeah, like actually like caring about the person they're speaking with on the other side of the phone. It's not just like doing whatever it takes to get them over.
Yeah. Yeah. So like being honest. So, I mean, that's good. I would ask yourself like, because when I hear those 3 core values, it doesn't tell me a lot about like how you work. And I think the core values should paint a picture of like, here's the shared beliefs and expectations for the team and like how we work, right? So that's why I think values it's counterintuitive, but they should usually be verbs. Like, you know, and some people could disagree with that, but I think most of the time, like the greatest cultures that I've noticed, usually the verbs. So it's not like integrity. It's like, you know, be honest always, you know, that's a bad example, but you know what I mean? So like, it's like, how do you do integrity? You know, it's like, that's kind of hard to grasp, but if you can make it a verb, like do this, right? Do the hard work or always be honest and do what's best or whatever, go above and beyond, whatever it may be. But like, if you can articulate and paint that picture, then it becomes increasingly easy to point out behavior that's out of alignment with the values. Right. So if you can't clearly articulate and that's not written down anywhere, then a lot of times like you're going to have these issues, and it's really hard to like reprimand someone when you haven't really made it clear from the beginning, like here's how we expect you to show up. So in that example, I would sit down and just give them the feedback, you know, and the best way to do that is like I have this like 7-step framework of like, hey, this isn't going to be a super fun conversation. It's okay, your job's not on the line, but I've been seeing some behavior from you that's out of alignment of our values and it's not acceptable. And so we're going to need to address that right now. So can I give you some feedback? Right. And they say, yeah. I'd say, cool. And then I'm going to give them examples like, hey, your attitude lately has just been really subpar, and give them examples, right? Like, and this should be like written down too. Like I would have it typed out on a doc. It'd be like, you're showing up late to meetings. You know, you're not, you know, when I tell you to send in your EOD reports, they're always late or you don't send them. Whatever it may be, right? I'm going to give them examples. And then I'm going to say, you see how like this is not in alignment with these values, right? It's not in alignment with be a leader, or lead by example would be a good one, right? This is out of alignment with lead by example. And so you're the top closer. That's great, but you're not leading the team. You're not setting a good example to the team. And that's what I need you to do. I need you to set a good example to the team. And I think, and then there's this idea of different types of leadership. There's like, what is it? Like authoritative leadership, which is like, do this because I said so. That's not a good way to lead. Yeah, it's like bottom. Then there's like transactional, which is like, hey, do this and I'll pay you more money. And that's transactional, not a good way to do it. But there's like transformational. And then the highest form is transcendent. That's more like impact driven. But if you do like transformational, it's like you should clearly paint like, you kind of have to know what they want. So in this example, maybe that this closer's goal is one day he wants to be sales manager or sales director, right? Let's say that hypothetically that's the case. So I would say, so you told me when you showed up here that you wanted to be sales manager, eventually sales director, and that you want to lead people, right? And so look, if you want to do that with your life, like you have to lead by example. So if you can do this for me, ultimately you're doing it for you, and it's going to put you in a position to where you're the obvious choice and I'll want to promote you. And then that's like to their benefit. So that's transformational leadership. And a lot of times there's like a click, they're like, oh, I can see what you're saying. And then at the end, I would address the severity. I think I got that by Layla Hermosi. She's like, so on a scale like 1 to 10, 1 being like, this isn't a big deal, and 10's like, you're fired. This is like a 6, right? And I think we can fix it today. And then you end with an agreement. So can you promise me that moving forward, you're going to, and go back to the things you wrote out, you're going to be on time with your EODs. You're going to show up to the meetings. You're going to like give back, be the tide that raises all ships. Like if something's working, share it on meetings, like have a positive attitude, lead by example. So can we agree that you'll do that? Yeah. And then say, look, and if I see another slip up, we're going to have another conversation. Action will have to be taken. So you manage agreements, not expectations.
Yeah. So you're reframing it to be, in their best interest, realigning them on their vision, which fits within your vision.
Yeah.
And then just basically tying down on that.
Yeah.
And getting commitment.
And the other thing too is, again, it makes it so much easier if these behaviors that you want are like clearly documented in the values of the company, and that they agree to that when they're during the interviewing process. So I remember earlier I was saying like the best way to develop leaders, it's like step 1, it's like the gate. Like the entrance to your culture is the hiring process. So like you've got to filter out people who are outside of alignment of the values, right? Like people who are just not going to mesh. So you got to have a good way to like screen for the culture fit. And the best way to do that is to clearly share those values with them during the interviewing process, and then ask for examples and uncover how they think, uncover things from their work history. So I think like how you interview, how you vet is like 50% of that. And then there's the management, which is like, okay, once they're hired, if you did all that well, then you can hold them accountable to it. Right. But if it's really hard to do that if you didn't screen for that. Yeah.
And so now let's say you take that same closer, because I feel like this is a mistake a lot of people make. They'll promote their top closer to become a manager, and then it turns out that he can't lead. Right. And so like you're in that situation now. Yeah. What do you do?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's a common mistake. Yeah, the top players don't make the best coach. So again, the way that I would deal with that, so in this scenario, they're already promoted. Yeah. So I think in that case, it depends on how bad it is. Obviously, these things are nuanced. If it's like atrocious, I would just demote him. But there is a high likelihood that he quits, which sucks. But let's say it's like bad, but it's not like horrible. I would just try to develop him. And so I would move this person to like a player coach. So put like 50% of his time is back on calls. And then 50% of the time is he's kind of like a coach type of person on the team. And like I personally would step in as manager and to like develop him. And so I would commit to like 30 days, make sure he knows what's going on. I'd say, hey, here's the truth. Again, don't sugarcoat it. I'd be like, you're not doing a good job. Like you're not, and clearly identify that. Like, what is he doing wrong? Is it like, you're not identifying on the calls, like why the deal was lost, right? Like you're like, your ability to identify the constraints on these calls is just not there. So I need to coach you on how to find why the deal didn't come across the line. Then like the feedback you're giving is just not very practical. It's not very actionable, and make sure he knows that. So then during the next 30 to 60 days while I'm developing him, like he knows what we're developing for, and there's like a deadline. So it's like, I need to see you do X, Y, Z by this date. So the expectations are very, very clear. So that's what I would do, again, unless it was just really, really, really bad.
Yeah. Like, with the issue I found, like a lot of the top closers, they're almost like unconsciously competent, and like they just have such high conviction and they're such good like energy, right? And so like they don't even necessarily have as much of a process. Like they've kind of got away from the process. This kind of like just their own thing. It's like when you start a business, right? Like you do everything yourself, and then like you get to a point where like right now I have to actually put into a system that other people can replicate.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of top players that just act like, or sell from a place of just like, authority and
Well, but they do need to be like a good performer, because otherwise, like when you're coaching and developing sales talent, I mean, how are you going to transfer the skill set if you haven't done it? So like the trick is to find someone who was a top performer. They don't need to be like the unicorn person, because oftentimes that unicorn just has like intrinsic traits that are like they're not transferable to other people. They just sort of are like really charismatic. And like, we had someone on our team like that. It was just the top performer consistently on the B2C offer, but like their method on the team was not something you could train, right? Like this person worked at like Disney World, and it was just like so like invested in the person they're talking to.
Yeah.
How do you teach that? So yeah, they have to, ideally you find someone that's like actually knows the process and follows the process. But the hardest part is getting them to be able to teach and develop. And that can be learned, but that's why I wouldn't promote someone without testing those things first. Like I said earlier, like in the same way, if I'm recruiting someone, I want to see them do the job. Like I'm not going to hire someone unless I gave them a work sample. Like if you're hiring a media buyer, like give them a small budget, see if they can beat the control, right? If you're hiring for a sales manager, give them calls that like you reviewed yourself and say, I want you to record a Loom video of going over this call and like coach as if you're coaching this rep. All right, see what they spot, see how they coach. If you're hiring a sales rep, again, same thing. You could do that, or you could just give them a batch of calls on a trial period. But like, I want to see them do the job. And ideally, you wouldn't be put in that situation. But like, let's say someone is already on the team and you want to promote them to coach, like they should be on a trial period where they're in a player coach role before you promote them. So like I did a whole presentation. I don't know if you were there, but I did a whole presentation on that, on like how to promote sales managers. And like, if you're not going to hire externally and you're going to promote from within, this is the way. And I mapped it out as like a 4-month process. And it starts out with like I'm going to train them. And then the next one is they're going to be player coach. And then it's going to be, they're going to move up to manager. And then there's like the maintenance.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people underestimate how long it actually takes to make that transition. And it's such a high leverage task, because like a lot of people make the mistake as well. It's like you hire for the role and that's like, cool, I don't have to worry about sales anymore. I've got a manager, right? And then all of a sudden it just starts descending into chaos.
Yeah.
Which you were talk about a lot, like with entropy.
Yeah.
So yeah, culture and hiring top talent. You talk a lot about culture being the weapon against entropy.
Yeah.
And so how do you define culture, first of all?
Yeah, culture, I would say, it's the shared beliefs, values, and principles and expected behavior in a team. If we're talking about business, obviously culture can be like in a people group of any people group, but yeah.
And so like, if you're going to go into a business, like what are you looking for in terms of culture? Like how are you assessing it? And then also like, what are you doing to develop that? Like what are the 3 or 4 most important things?
I would like how I'm assessing culture, which again, I could talk about this for like hours. It's so loaded, because this isn't like my opinion. Like I looked at a lot of these like studies. There's been many like scientific and academic studies on the matter of like what's the number one determining factor of the success of a company. And every single time it's the culture, right? It is the culture. It's like how people communicate, how they show up, right? The accountability, all these things. And if you can build like a high performance culture, it's kind of like gravity. Like the better the culture is, the more like top performers want to work there, and you keep top talent, right? If you have a bad culture, you're going to deal with, turnover, like involuntary turnover or voluntary turnover. And that's very expensive. It slows you down. It sets you back. There's lost like IP, like there's so much there. So it's like really in your best interest to try and build a great culture, right? And I think the way to do it is, and there's probably people way smarter than me that have like talked about this. There's a great book on this called The Culture Code that I would recommend, but people have to feel like they belong, right? So that's really important. Like a sense of belonging. Like I think here's a great example of like a great culture that I would point to is like high performing sports teams, right? Like there's this like lazy, really cringe way to do culture, which is like, we're a family. Like, ever been at a company like that? Like, we're not just a team, we're a family. It's like, shut up. No, like if I don't do my job, you're going to fire me. You can't fire your brother. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is not a family. Like, I like to think about it more like a high performing sports team. It's like, hey, we got each other's backs, but if like you're the weak link, if you don't do your job, if you don't have my back, then like you're off the team. like you're going to get traded, right? Like you're going to, you know what I mean? So there's got to be this like shared understanding that like we are the best of the best, and here's the expectation, and we're all relying on each other. And so, and if the minute that you start showing up in a way that's not in alignment with that, like, you know, there's going to be consequences. So
it's going to attract the right type of person as well in the first place.
And that's what I mean by belonging. Like it's not like for like job security forever. Like, hey, do whatever you want. We're never going to fire you. Like not like that, but it's like clear expectations and high expectations. So that's a belonging. The next one is there's a term that I think Google, if I remember correctly, introduced this idea of like psychological safety, which isn't really important. However, it can be done wrong. So for example, when Elon Musk, I think, took over Twitter, he talked about how there was like just so much waste, like so much money going in places that shouldn't be, money being spent that shouldn't be, projects that never should have existed. And it was so inefficient. And everyone was, when he came in to like fix it, everyone was like, this is not our culture psychological safety. And he's like, what? He's like, that is like we're never going to use that word ever again. But I think that's a little overkill. The idea of psychological safety is the belief that people can speak their mind in it without like inappropriate reprimandation, right? So what do I mean by that is like leaders should feel like they should speak up if something's being done wrong or incorrectly, or there's a bad idea. They should be able to speak up about that without you like embarrassing them or like them losing their job. I think Patrick Lencioni talks about like radical transparency. I think Ray Dalio talks about that too. So there should be a culture of like where we don't win with seniority, we win with great ideas, like a meritocracy. So like if somebody has a great idea, we should give room to that. We should discuss it. If people disagree, we should give room to that and discuss it. So again, we're here to be the best, and our feelings about the matter don't really matter, right? Like we're just going to be the best. And if someone's feelings gets hurt, it's okay. Like, right? That doesn't. So belonging, you know, again, high expectations. You should always leave room for like healthy conflict. I think that's like the main ones I'd say. How I would define a great culture in a company is that. And like the way that you develop that is, again, it's saying the same thing 1,000 different ways, just over and over again. If you feel like you've said your core values and your expectations and where you're going too much, double it and just keep doing it. Say it over and over again. Here's why we're here. Here's where we're going, right? I'll give you an example. So this is a little bit philosophical, but like where, like if you take the example of like a culture in like a city or like a nation or something, right? You would define like, right? Like you're staying in Spain, I think, right?
Yeah.
So like they have a culture, right? Yeah. There's like a culture of Spain. It's very different than New York.
Very, very lazy compared to New York.
Yeah. And the way that culture is formed, if we were to ask, where does culture come from? Like it's usually like the story, right? The story, like here's like the story of where we came from, where we're going. And if like that story is being told, like, you know, in school and like when you're a kid and like in history, when like all these things, when you're in history class, when you're whatever, that story is being told in different ways, right? And that if you're going to like change that culture, you start to change the story. You start to say, well, actually, that's not really why we're here. It's actually, here's our history, or here's what, right? So different stories starts to divide people, and they start to get like all these like different subcultures, right? And the same thing can happen in a company. Like if you want to change the culture, change the story, like here's why we're here. Can you answer that? Here's where we're going. Here's who does what. And here's what's expected. And here's what's not tolerated. And you just say that over and over and over and over and over. Mm-hmm. And again, if you can do that, then you start to attract people who like exemplify that culture, and it just starts to compound. It becomes like this living thing.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then like from a practical standpoint, how are you enforcing that on an ongoing basis? You mentioned about like constantly saying the same thing over and over again. Yeah. Like what does that look like in day to day? Because like I remember when I first started, like I felt so repetitive when I was just saying the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. It can get painful. So the way that we did it, which I really liked, for example, back at Closers, and I've been able to help other companies do the same, like Hampton, for example. Like we really changed the values and introduced like a culture and everything. The way that we did it is like, so let's say you come to like apply for a job, right? It starts with the hiring, like always. And part of what we would do is first I would start with a group interview. So that almost in any role, like people are really adverse to group interviews. I don't know why. I've had clients where I'm like, you should do a group interview. They're like, people are going to be offended. I was like, no, people don't really care. But you have a group interview. So I get like 12 applicants like on a group interview, and then I kind of DQ like 6 of them or something. And So then I have a behavioral test. And this isn't like a quiz. They don't know they're being tested, but like in between my one-on-one interview and the group interview, I do that behavioral test. And what I did is I took a meeting that we had as a company where we went over the values. So we went over like defining our culture, our mission, our vision, and values, right? So like, again, that's called the MVV. So your mission, your vision, and values. So we went over that as a team. It was like a 40-minute recording. And I told them, hey, watch it. And I want you to just pay attention. I want you to write down on a doc, like values that stood out to you. And I'm saying this on the group interview. I don't write it down. Okay. So I say this out loud and I'm expecting them to remember. I expect them to write it down and to do it. So I say, write down like all the values and then give me like examples of like times in your personal or professional life where you exemplify these values and like why that was important to you. And just write down like what stood out to you. And then I say this, I say that this next piece is optional. It's not required. But what would be great is if you record a Loom video of you like going over the doc, right? So I have them do that and I send them the recording and then they do it. And anyone who didn't do the Loom, I just DQ. Like, why would I hire someone who like didn't go above and beyond? Yeah. Right. And then I also get to see like what stood out to them. What were these examples in their life? So I'm already transmitting the culture even in the interviewing process. So I'm getting to, I see some people would send like 2 pages. Some people would, it'd be like 3 bullet points. And like, so I get a really good idea of like, did this like click for them? Are they like living this in their life? Like when I ask for examples, I want actual examples. I don't want, like generally when I apply for a job, I'm thinking, I don't want generalities. I want actual stories. So usually those like 6 people that I would send it to, I get it down to like 2 or 3, right? And so that's at the hiring process. Then once they come onto the team, the onboarding is broken up into 2 stages. So it's company onboarding and then role specific onboarding. So company onboarding means it's company wide, right? So it doesn't matter the role, everybody goes through it. And then the role specific is pertinent to the role that they're getting, right? During the company onboarding, they're going to go through more of that. So we have a whole video on the mission, a whole video on the vision, the whole video on the values. And then we have our strategic principles. So we had like a whole video series on like, if you want to get promoted, like here's how you get promoted. If you want to make more money, here's how you make more money. Here's our Slack etiquette. Here's our meeting policy, right? Here's our dress policy. Like it's everything from how to think and how to show up. And we're just like transmitting that the whole way. They're going through all these videos. They're taking notes, sending it to their manager, every single video. So it's just instilling it, right? And then on like the day-to-day, we had a company-wide meeting once a month. And on this company-wide meeting, everyone shows up. It's about an hour. And so in between these company-wide meetings, so on a 30-day cycle, we would have this channel that was called shout-outs. And people, if somebody was doing a great job, they would shout out a person. And then what we required was that you have to attach it to a value. So it's like, hey, I want to shout out, Josh, because he's doing a great job of high say-do ratio or like getting and staying in sync. And here's an example. So when these shout outs are coming in, we just had a VA that would keep track of that. And whoever got the most shout outs would like win a prize. So on the company-wide meeting, we'd say, okay, this month's winner for these values is this, and we'd send them a gift card, right? Yep. So now there's like a reward. There's like, it's turning into a system and it's constantly staying on top of their mind. Like people are getting shouted out, but it's always attached to a value. And then we would do like a company-wide offsites 1 to 2 times a year. And we would give away like actual trophies and it would always be attached to a value. So it's like constantly getting the values in front of people. And it starts at the hiring and then it's just consistently, there's like systems. Does that make sense? Yeah. I love that. Yeah. We started doing a lot of that, like the shout outs, even the beginning of team meetings as well. Yeah. So yeah, it's huge. Yeah. And I like that, shouting out like values as opposed to like, he closed the deal. Right. It's like, actually something more meaningful. Yeah. Cool. Negativity is the number 1 predictor of job failure. Yeah. And so how are you combating that in your own business or in businesses that you consult in? Yeah. Well, you can screen for that. So there's a personality trait called neuroticism. And that means like someone who's prone to negative emotion. And we were kind of talking about that earlier about the emotional stability. So you can screen for that during the hiring process. I highly recommend that you screen for conscientiousness and neuroticism. And then, however, if it does come up and people are being negative, I think, again, you get what you tolerate. And so I just don't tolerate it. Like if someone's being gossipy, like I'm getting them on a meeting, on a Zoom, one-on-one, and I'm going to tell them, hey, like here's what I'm seeing. This is out of alignment of the values. This is what I need to see. I encourage the team to like lead up. Like if they see a problem, there's not a lot of reason why they should like lead horizontally. Like don't go to someone like a peer and gossip about that person. Always go up, like go and talk about it to a leader, right? And your leader should be prepared for that and everything. So like I had this account manager one time, is very, very skilled, worked with some of the biggest names. Like he had been like on Grant Cardone's team and stuff. He was like very skilled, and I hired him. And again, very talented person, but every single meeting he'd show up and be like complaining about the clients and like almost like being very like condescending. You'd be like, this isn't even a real business owner. I don't know why I'm coaching them. Just like very entitled kind of. And then he was just, it turns out he was like meeting with other people on the team just to like complain about. I'm like, and so I told him that, again, kind of that structure I gave you earlier, like I show up and I have like a 7-step framework for how to like, you know, correct somebody, and always attach it to the values, and we get an agreement. Don't, you know, you're not going to do that anymore. If I see it again, action will have to be taken. But he kept doing it. So I let him go. And the craziest thing was that once I let him go, dude, like the whole like culture of that department, just like 100x, dude, just like got so much more fun. Retention went up. Like I'm telling you, like negativity is like really is such a virus. Like,
yeah, we've seen the same thing, even at a management level. Like we had something in a manager, and like he was getting results. But dude, when we let him go, like the entire team lifted, like performance, not just like culture.
Yeah, 100%.
Crazy.
It is crazy. I had a client one time who had 2 salespeople, and one of them was outperforming the other. And when I did the call reviews and I actually reviewed the like sales meetings, I knew that top performer like needed to go, but I'm not going to tell my client like, hey, fire him today. Like, you know, I never just tell them like fire someone.
Yeah.
So I try to stay out of it. I just try to help them think about it. And he had like been doing like call reviews and stuff. Long story short, it turns out that sales rep who was the top performer was actually like calling people ahead of time and like DQing them. And like, so his like actual, even though his close rate was higher, like his actual revenue generated was actually about the same. Right. But he wasn't tracking that. He was just tracking close rate, which is again why quantitative analysis is important. So anyways, once we pointed this out, he was like, had to get on a meeting, tell him stop doing that. You're going to, if the call ends up on your calendar, you're taking the call. He ends up like complaining a lot. So he just fires him. And crazy enough, like do revenue like 2x. Like that sales rep literally doubled his performance just because this like negative guy who was like complaining about the leads all the time, calling them ahead of time, DQing them, just got off the team. Yeah, so it is so crazy.
Yeah, wild. When it comes to hiring like top talent in your experience, like what's the core 1 or 2 things that those people are actually attracted to aside from just money, right? And what the OT is.
Yeah, I think I would put 2 things. So in that book, Organizational Physics, for example, it talks about like, again, if you're fighting entropy, right? Which, you know, I could talk about what that is exactly, but regardless, if you're fighting entropy is the enemy to scale. And if you're fighting it, you need like actual energy being injected into the business. And so energy, there's a couple of different forms of energy, and like money is one of them. But another one is market clout. So I will say like top talent people, like if they're an A+ player, like a superstar, they're a lot of times they're attracted to money, yeah, but they're also attracted to market clout. Like if you're known for being the best, like the reputation of the company is important. Like a top talent person doesn't want to go somewhere and be associated with this like company that's known for like scamming people, right? Yeah. Like they're just not going to do that. So I think like status is really key to especially salespeople. They care about status, they care about money, they care about loyalty, all these things. So again, reputation, protect the reputation of every company because it helps with recruiting, and pay them well. And then the other thing is a culture. It really, they want to feel like they have, like, especially leaders, like if you're looking for recruiting leaders, managers, directors, C-suite, whatever, I think like autonomy, like they want to know that they are going to be able to like build, like they want to feel like they have a seat at the table.
Yeah.
They're not just like here for a job, but like, hey, we want you on this team. We want your input, we want your feedback. You know, they want to feel like they're building with you. And the more that you can really structure your role and your management style around that, I think is important.
Yeah. So, yeah, man, it's crazy how much of an impact it has as well, like the culture side of it. Like we've had reps leave to go and make more money elsewhere. Like they want to progress, they want to go like, do more things like what you were saying about earlier. Within 3 months, they've come back purely for the culture. Like 100%. They just love their culture that much in the sales team that it comes back.
Yeah.
And so people will pick that over money in a lot of instances, I've noticed.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I remember, many times I've seen people who have their own business and they like shut down their business just to take a job because they're like, they miss that camaraderie.
Yeah.
Right. That camaraderie of like, I'm collaborating with people, things like that. It's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll finish with some situational questions for culture. So It's Monday morning. Your sales team energy is just completely dead. Close rates have dropped 10% in the last 3 weeks, and there's side chatter happening in the DMs amongst each other, right? Walk us through how you run that culture reset.
Culture reset. Okay. Well, I have actually done like a culture reset, but it's like a separate meeting. Mm-hmm. But if this is like a Monday, you're saying you like show up to the sales meeting, the energy is really bad.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I think in that instance, culture what can hurt the culture. Well, and in this case, it's not so much about the culture as much as it sounds like to me, it's just like the team morale, which is more temporary, right? So I'm not too worried about it. If my culture generally is strong, but like for a day, the morale's a little bit low, I'm not going to worry too much. But what I would do is clearly identify what's going on, right? So morale sometimes dips when they don't know why they're sucking, right? Mm. So again, like I used to say this all the time, there's no shame in missing your targets, but there's shame in missing your targets and not knowing why. Because you want your sales reps to have a sense of control, right? Mm-hmm. Control produces a feeling of certainty, and certainty sells. So the more that you can manufacture certainty and control, that's important. And the way to do that is to get clear on what's going on the calls. So that's why a call review would be a really good idea. I'm going to say, hey, like, okay, guys, like, let's just call it what it is. Like, I probably would make it kind of funny. Mm-hmm. I'd be like, well, are you guys like hungover? Like, did you crawl out of bed? What's going on? There's like, no, it's just like, we're behind projections. We're all stressed out. I'd be like, hey, that's fine. It's fine. Again, there's no shame in missing your targets, but there's shame in missing your targets and not knowing why. So walk me through it. What's going on? Why are you behind? And if they can't really answer, then I'm going to say, let's figure it out. So like pull up a call. Right. And then I'm going to review the call and tell them exactly why they missed the deal. And then once that clarity hits of like, oh, that's why I'm missing, that's why I'm behind, that gives you that feeling of control. Mm. And so if they feel like they're in control again, certainty goes up, team morale goes up. So that's how I would handle that. And then I would also just encourage them, like, the more that you can inject that you believe in them, I think that's so underrated. You can't just like shame people and like tell them everything they're doing wrong. I'm going to say, look, guys, like, you know how to sell. Like, do you know how to sell? I'd be like, yeah. And I'd be like, who are you? Like, they're going to like, I want them to like be confident and be like, I'm Mitchell Myles. Be like, okay, you're top producer. I hired you for a reason. You're on this team. Okay. You missed 1 week, guys. Like, doesn't mean we missed, you missed one game. It happens. Right. But like, you know how to sell. So go out there and do what you do best. Go make money, go collect credit cards, yeah.
Nice. Okay, cool. And a final one. You just lost your sales manager. You've actually experienced this, right?
Yeah.
So you've just lost your sales manager and a couple of your best reps went with them.
Yeah.
What's your process for like rebuilding the team? Whilst making sure like everyone else isn't completely shaken and thinking of it as well.
Yeah, because if a manager leaves, there's usually going to be like collateral turnover. I've actually dealt with this. So I have that's kind of a loaded topic, but I'll give you like the short version is I would try to mitigate the turnover as much as possible. So I would meet one-on-one with everyone on the team and just call it what it is. Hey, so-and-so just quit. They're leaving. How are you? How are you feeling? And then I would ask them to, like, I would try to buy some time. So I would ask them to basically do like a what like a PIP is, like a performance improvement plan. And I would try to do it in reverse. So I would say, hey, like if I just fired you for no reason without any warning, you'd be pretty pissed, right? They'd be like, yeah. I'd be like, okay. So like, I would never blindside you like that. I would do a PIP. I'd give you an opportunity to fix it. I want you to do that to me. Like, if you're thinking about leaving, don't just do it for no reason. Don't do it out of the blue. Like, I want you to say, hey, I've got like 30 days left. And like, let's clarify like what you need. Is it like more money? Is it like, what is it? Like, and why would you leave? And like, just give me some time to fix it. And then identify what that is, they're either going to say, no, I'm good. Like, I'm happy I'm not leaving. I didn't like them anyways, whatever. Or they're going to say, yeah, like I'm actually like looking at some other jobs. Like I probably got like 2 weeks. I'd say, okay, well, give me 30 days and I'm going to fix it. Just don't leave me. Something like that. So that would buy me some time. And then I would do that full on like audit that I mentioned earlier, quantitative analysis, qualitative analysis, figure out what the problem is, if there's a problem. Like, why did that person leave? Is it because the manager wasn't making enough money if they're on a performance like kind of based compensation, or was it cultural? was it just kind of a fluke? They just got a really good job offer. So I identify like why they left and try to fix it if it's an actual problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the pip in reverse is a good move. So
yeah. No, I love it, man. Well, I could talk all day about the culture and the hiring. So but thank you for coming on. Where can people find you?
Yeah, just I'm on X and Instagram at Mitchell B. Myles and YouTube at Mitchell Myles.
Love it. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, man.
Of course. Thanks for having me, bro.